Pretty much all of us want to send more things, and we want to send harder things. So we pick a project and our heart is set on it. Maybe it's a mini project that takes a few sessions, or maybe it's a mega project that's going to stretch across several seasons. The thing is, the length of time we spend working it often depends on the strength of our projecting game, particularly what we do on those important working attempts. And many of us either keep working things when we should have sent weeks ago, or we cut off the working goes and start redpoint attempts way too soon, resulting in an even longer process. The best climbers put themselves in send position with fewer working attempts, and they know when they're ready to get it done. So the question is, how can we make better use of our working goes and send hard things faster? I'm Chris Hampton.
This is Nate Drolet.
And together we form Henry Ford.
Okay.
I had a different name, but I was sure you would get this one.
Assembly line?
Assembly lines.
Okay.
Because while Ford didn't invent the assembly line, he did revolutionize it and turned it into a far more efficient process. The name I was going to have was Ransom E. Olds, who was the person who invented it from Oldsmobile.
Ooh, okay.
And then Ford kind of took it, remade it, turned it into this efficient process, which is what we're talking about today. So let's get into it.
It's time to build.
Well, can you sort of walk us through what is a working go? What do we even mean by that? And how does a working go look in general?
Absolutely. So this is where I think just knowing this alone is the first biggest step.
Yeah.
A big mistake a lot of beginners and intermediates make, both with sport climbing and with bouldering, is kind of just giving goes from the ground every time. It's like, okay, I'm going to try and give a red point go. If we're looking at routes, you try and give a red point go. You go as high as you can, you fall. And okay, now let's just, I guess, kind of work out wherever I fell and then go to the top from there. Yeah. Like that's amateur hour. That's step one. You just got into sport climbing. This is how we do it. And that can take you a little ways. But man, it is the slowest way possible to try and send things. So
totally.
With a working go, step one is that we acknowledge this is not a red point attempt. Comically, many years ago, there was a certain pro climber, who I will not name, who would not count their red point goes. Like, they differentiated between working goes and red point goes. So if they said, I climbed this in 5 goes, they meant red point goes.
Yeah.
They may have spent 20 goes working it, but those were working goes. Those didn't count towards the red point goes, which is kind of funny.
Did this unnamed pro climber differentiate by when they took their dog draw off their harness?
This is the same pro climber.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, I actually had that in my notes. I was like, I'm going to leave that out just in case it hits too close to home. I don't think they do that anymore. Actually, I think this person doesn't really track goes that much anymore. But this is important to keep in mind. Like, this person, who is a great climber, saw so much value, so much of a bifurcation in the two, such a distinction between I am working this route and I am trying to send. There was not an overlap of, well, I'll go up, I'll see what happens, and if it goes bad, I'll kind of figure it out. No, that was not part of the plan.
That's a really great distinction. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but yeah, that's a great way to divide it up. Because you can make a high point attempt that's not a red point attempt.
Yes.
And I think that's a big mistake people make. Anytime they're starting from the ground, it's a red point attempt, or it's just a working go because I know I'm going to fall somewhere. I'm going to try that move. I'm going to continue to the top, like you said. That's not necessarily a good working go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what makes a working go is, first off, you have a plan for what you're trying to do. You say, okay, I have all of these questions I need to answer. What am I doing at the fourth bolt? Can I make the first 3 bolts of 511 easy climbing on this 13A more efficient to where I
Yeah.
get to bolt 4 feeling completely fresh? You want to answer all these different questions. Am I using the best beta for the redpoint crux? Yes, I'm doing it consistently off the bolt, but how am I going to feel when I'm pumped? So you have all these questions, and then we need to try and answer them. So you formulate different methods for kind of testing different methods. And this is what a working go really comes down to is how effectively can you use your time?
Yeah, totally. And I think for a lot of people who haven't like really delved into this, a working go number one is you're always going to have a dog draw on you so that you
Mhm.
can go in direct and hang. You might have a stick clip on you
Yeah.
to clip through sections, to clip up the rope so you can try something on top rope, whatever it might be. There's going to be a lot of exploring usually. There's going to be searching for things. And like you said, and I think this is maybe the most important piece of it, you're going to be trying to answer questions. Everything you do up there should be to answer questions. What I see a lot of people do is almost to pad their ego, like, oh, I'm going to do this section again that I know I'm really good at already. You're not answering a question there. You're just
Mhm.
you're just letting yourself know that you can do that section, which you already know. Answering the questions is the really important part.
Yes. That's I completely agree. And something that I see happen, God, this happened in the red so often because the red is notorious for being more sustained, not a ton of very hard moves.
Yeah.
So a really common way to get a working go in to the process is you're kind of going to bolt up your project as your last warm up.
Yeah.
And this is a nice way, you know, your first burn on your project every day, especially if you're a weekend warrior. Let's say you're going to try it every Saturday. There's a bit of, I mean, this isn't a phrase, but like route rust, essentially. You
Yep.
haven't been on it in a week. You're not going to be fully dialed in. But by your second, third, fourth go up the project, oh man, you're moving more intuitively. You're really locked in. You're grabbing every hold exactly how you want to because that short term memory is really buffering your skills. So you can kind of get around this route rust by bolting up your project, as your second or third route of the day into the warm up kind of thing. And, a big thing with good working goes is putting your ego in check. And something I saw happen so often climbing in the red is people would be like, oh, I'll bolt up it, at the end of the warm up. And then when they're tying in, they're like,
Then they just keep
well,
going.
I'll just keep going until I fall. And it's like,
Yeah.
you trying to be flash pump today? You trying to make this your first and last good burn on this route? Because it's also not going to be a good one. But yeah, that's a good method. Bolting up it as part of your warm up. That can work well, but you kind of said it. You have to not let your ego take control. We're not trying to do links we know we can already do. We're not trying to, a big one is if you're trying a boulder section, let's say you're trying the crux. Let's say, yeah, you've already done the crux 4 different times in isolation. Well, can you do it from one move lower? Can you do it with all the foot moves that lead you into that starting sequence? Because that's where things start to really matter. It's easy to do the repetitions on the, quote, hard parts, but does it really matter if you're not growing this? If you're not saying, okay, I'm making a measurable change to doing bigger and bigger links, to doing more challenging links that are going to demand more of me.
Yeah, totally. And with that, I kind of want to get into some other tips, tricks, things you're going to want to look at on these working goes. So you tie in, you talk to your belayer. This is a working go. Here's my plan.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
What are some of the things you're going to do when you go up the route? I think obviously the first few steps, and I don't want to put these in like a linear, these are the steps you go through, because I think there are going to be people already steeped in this who can take 7 of these steps and do them all in one go. You know, people who are
Totally.
new to it, or if the route is more complicated or longer or whatever, it might take 2 goes to get through step 1. It really just depends. But these are the general things you want to figure out. You obviously want to figure out the moves, where the route goes. If you can do all the moves, you may not first time. If it's a big project or a really cruxy project, you might not do all the moves first go. And then you also want to look at clipping stances.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I don't make all the clips first go up, if I have to like grab a draw to clip, or if I'm stick clipping because I know it's really hard, I'll still try to find the stance where I would want to clip, just to have it in my pocket for the next go to try and actually make that clip. I'll also look for rest stances.
Huge.
So I think that's the first line of what you want to accomplish. Figure out the moves, figure out the rest stances, figure out the clipping stances, and then on the ground, you can look back up and say, here's how I want to pace this route.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the hardest sections. Here are the easier sections. Here's where I can rest. This clip is hard. These clips are easy. I'm going to need to sprint through here. I can take it a little easier and breathe through here. Then I need to buckle down again and sprint, or whatever it's going to be. So I think you can get a lot out of your first working goes if you keep those things in mind.
Totally. I think those are good fundamentals. And you can even think of them as checkpoints too, in a way of building motivation. Because with harder routes, it is not uncommon to not be able to do a move your first time up a route, or not be able to clip bolts. Man, sometimes you don't figure out how to clip a bolt until you're like, oh no, I might be getting here from the ground soon.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how that draw is getting clipped.
Yeah.
Like, that happens. So having these kind of as little victories, I think, is super useful. Where if you talk to higher level climbers, oh man, they're not sweating it. I remember when I was climbing in Smith, I was talking with Nina Caprez, and she was excited at one point. She was like, oh, I've clipped all of the bolts on to bolter, not to be, on lead now. Amazing. And she had been trying it for a couple days at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't discouraged. It wasn't like, oh no, I can't do it. Where if you talk to, often I'll talk with 512 climbers and they'll be like, man, I've gone up it 3 times. I still don't know how to clip bolt 4. Like, I clearly have no business climbing on 512. And it's like, no, you need the confidence of higher level climbers who just know something's hard climbing is hard. So it's okay that some of these things are going to take a little more time than others.
Yeah. And we don't want it to be the norm per se, but it's not unheard of that getting the bolt clipped, getting the draw clipped is the thing that's going to allow you to do the route. Like,
oh yeah,
I can think of one route in particular, Buttercup in the red. Like I knew that if I was able to clip that draw from the ground, then I could go to the top.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably skip that draw and go to the top, but it was too scary and I just wasn't willing to do it. So that became the crux for me, was get to that draw with enough to clip it, and then I'll be able to relax enough to do the final few hard moves to the ledge. That can absolutely happen. And I clipped that draw on lead exactly one time.
When I did White Man's Overbite, exact same. There's a bolt that everyone skips. You can kind of end up in a tree or really low if you do skip it and you fail above. I couldn't commit. I like clipping bolts. I've clipped that bolt one time and I took it to the top. But even with that, if we're looking at working goes, man, you can dive into so much minutia. If you're not able to clip a bolt, try all the different stances. Try lengthening a draw. I have lengthened draw. Man, sometimes I have lengthened draws. I've tripled them so that I could clip a bolt at my hip comfortably rather than having to do a big cross move. I could do a really low rose. So ironically, I was still climbing essentially above the bolt to clip, but this just made it to where I didn't have to bend my arm to clip this. I could be more relaxed. Much easier. I've shortened quick draws for that same reason. Sometimes I'll add it. If there's a really long lengthened draw, I'll add a shorty onto it. Looking at what direction the quick draw is facing. All of these little things makes a huge difference. And if we're talking about clipping too, and we're really going into minutia of working burns, okay, let's say you've got all the clips. What hands are you clipping with? Can you, because if the clips are easy, I will sometimes alternate which hand I'm clipping with if it's a big power endurance route, because, I had a client who recently just did Zookeeper, a guy named Max Barron, who was awesome. First 514. But that route is notoriously hard.
Max.
Huge congrats. And he worked hard for it. It was awesome. But one thing that makes that route hard is every single clip, your left hand is on the wall and you're clipping with your right hand. And the final clip, you have to grab a bad sloper and clip off of it. And your left hand has just been wrecked from clipping, 7 bolts to get there. So with that, it was like, okay, the bolts are all to your right. So let's figure out ways to sneak in little left hand shakes the whole way up the route.
Yeah.
And so some working burns could just be, let's find some little micro stances to be able to shake that hand. As silly as that might sound to some people.
Totally. I want to add on a little bit to the clipping nerdy minutia. There are a couple times when if I get to a bolt that's hard to clip because you're still close enough to the bolt below you that you're having to pull up lots of little bits of slack to clip it, I might even lengthen the bolt below me that wasn't hard to clip.
Yeah, that's
just so I can reach down and get a longer pull and pull more rope up at once so that I can clip. Or I'll purposely Z-clip and then just unclip the draw below me that I can still reach. I think those are tactics I don't see often, and I've suggested to people to make their clipping life easier, and they're always confused. Like, what do you mean? I can clip that bolt below fine. I don't need to extend it. I'm like, no, it's for the next one.
Yeah.
But they don't quite get it. And what you were talking about, you're still clipping from the same stance you would have clipped, but it's an easier clip if the draw is longer and you can clip at your hip or something. I think especially when a route is really hard, you have to start taking those things into account. And the last thing I'll say on this is, for me, I prefer to clip with the gate facing me. So I will very often on my working goes figure out which way do I want the draws to face, because of how I'm clipping the draw, which is the fastest, easiest way for me to clip.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's so much minutia you can get to. The idea of Z-clipping, too, for anyone who thinks that's ridiculous. Emily Harrington used it when she climbed Waka Flocka, which I believe was her first 14B. But yeah, in the low section, there were just clips that were too close. So she would intentionally Z-clip and then reach down and unclip the one below her, because that was...
And you can always clip it back in to the right side of the rope, if you want that piece of protection under you. But it's so much faster than doing 12 little... pull up bites on the rope just so you can clip this draw that's at your face.
Yes. So yeah, I think, we definitely did a deep dive right there into clipping, and there's more you can go into, is included, because immediately my mind was like, well, we haven't even talked about, I will change my grip position that I'm clipping from. If I'm on a crimpy route, I'll see if I can clip from a front 3 drag because it's more passive.
Yeah.
Your time under tension on a clip is some of the longest you'll be other than resting on a route. So choosing how you're going to clip is a big deal.
Yeah. I'm going to sidetrack us here really quick.
Please do.
I'm dealing with exactly that problem right now on a Nemesis route. The hold I'm clipping bolt 3 from, I've gone from that hold to the top. The crux, the hardest crux is at the top. Actually, both cruxes are above this draw. I've gone from there to the top, but I can't go from one move lower, and I haven't been able to yet go from one move lower and finish it, because that hold is in cut enough that I can't 3-finger drag it But when I do, I can 3-finger drag it, but then I can't do the next move because I have to be in full crimp to sort of pull out on the hold and lever up.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't make that shift because there's not a good left hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I put my right hand on it. I have to full crimp, and then I clip from the full crimp. And then 3/4 of the rest of the route are right hand full crimps. And by the time I get to the hardest move, I'm fucked.
Yeah. And this is like these kinds of things. So that wasn't even a tangent because that's exactly where I wanted to go. A huge part of working burns is step 1, have a plan, go up, decide what you want to test out. Form some hypotheses, test them. But the next thing is you need to be observant of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
That is so important. That is when you see people who are very sharp with sport climbing, the people who just can absorb so much, they're able to pay attention to more things at once. They can say, I keep dancing my feet around as I'm entering that crux. It hasn't stopped me yet, but I know on link, I need to have a better plan. It's not even a problem yet, but they know it will be. Same thing with this. It's being able to stop and recognize, man, I am powering down on these right hand crimps. Where is this starting? Where can I ease this burden? And unfortunately for you, it's kind of stopping at this one point. But
yeah, like when I grab that hold to clip, I feel the pump clock immediately like go into double time.
Yeah.
Like, and I know the race is on at that point.
Yeah. So being able to pay attention to all of these sensations as you're climbing is really important. And especially being able to contextualize them within where you are on the route, how fatigued you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the things that really separates good from great sport climbers is being able to go up and say, okay, yeah, this move at the 8th bolt, like I can do it every time if I just lock it off 100%. A good sport climber would be like, okay, that's my method. I can do it every single time. Where a great sport climber will say, I know I'm not going to be able to 100% static this move 8 bolts in. Even though I've never dropped this move doing these bolt-to-bolt links or even short links, I need to come up with a backup plan. If I miraculously feel great from the ground, cool, I'll lock it off. But I need that plan B in my back pocket so that I can immediately grab for it because I refuse to fall on this move.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think along those exact same lines are great climbers will very often know the difference between when a move just feels intuitive to them and when it's right, when they're doing it the best way.
Yeah.
And this can happen through whole sections of a route. Like if you go up on that first working burn and you're a beginner to working burns and you're just climbing through everything and then you hit a hard part and you figure that part out, the great climber will take note as they go of, did this feel intuitive for me to get through it? Or was there a moment of hesitation? Was there a moment of struggle? And if there was a moment of hesitation or struggle, they'll go back and iron that out. And the same in a crux. If they do a move the first way, they're not immediately going to say, that's the best way because that's the way I did it. Maybe this way felt intuitive, but maybe there's a less intuitive way that gets me through here faster or requires less power or, doesn't require me to crimp with that right hand again. Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else I want to add on this is being able to listen to anyone if you're working on a route with other people or if you're looking for beta from other people, I think is such a crucial thing. It's really easy to get stuck in your own head or even be like, I know my body. I know what I'm capable and what I'm not. And sometimes you're going to climb on routes with people of all different ability levels.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was climbing in rifle and Ryan Sewell, who I believe has climbed 515, very good climber. He went up a 13B that I had tried a few times. And there was this one section where I was just getting frustrated. I would go up, and this is in rifle, and there's like a dozen different holds. Couldn't figure out my sequence, and I would find something that would work. Hadn't been sport climbing in a few years at this point. I just couldn't figure out what I liked, and every time I would get there from the ground and fall, and couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. He came over, and he's like, "Hey, mind if I hop on?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he was like, "Oh, I've tried it some years ago, but I want to kind of try and almost on-site it because I've forgotten everything." So he went up, and the way he did the sequence was ridiculous. Skipped 90% of holds, did this enormous move. And I was like, that's sick. This was impressive. Incredible climbing. He ended up climbing it first try. And it was fun to watch, but watching him in that second section where I was falling, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, that's cool. Must be nice to be Diesel. So I go up, I fall again, predictably. Try a couple different things. Then I was like, you know what? Just for fun, I'm going to try his method. Turns out it was amazing. This massive cross move, like skipping all of these holds, something that I wanted to write off because he was a much stronger, better climber than me.
Yeah.
Turns out it was a great way. Like he's just a good climber, and he was able to find a good method on the fly. But had I not been able to take a step back and been like, no, this isn't just dumb. Like, let's actually give it a try. Yeah, who knows? Like it might have taken me even more tries to do that thing.
Yeah, I think you have to treat your working goes kind of like a scientist, gather all of the information, make your hypothesis. Your hypothesis was that's not going to work for me. But then you have to test it because it might work for you. It also might not. And then, at least for now, if it's a long-term project and you come back next season, I think you have to very quickly run through your checklist again. Like, does this beta work now? Does this beta work now? Because you're a different climber than you were a year ago. So let's test everything again. You can do it much faster. It's a working burn. And I think people have this aversion to late stage working burns.
Oh, yeah.
They feel like they want to get to redpoint goes, and then it's only forward from there. Not really. I think you should start your redpoint goes maybe a little too early, as long as you say this redpoint go is specifically to help new questions arise.
Yes.
Once those new questions arise, I'm going back to the drawing board, more working goes, see if I can answer those questions. Then I can redpoint. I think too many people hit redpoint and they're only in redpoint mode.
Totally. I mean, because it feels like giving up ground if you say, yeah, I'm going to try and give it a burn, see how it goes today. And then you fall halfway up. Yikes. And if it's clear that you still need more work.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about some of the common mistakes made on these working goes. How do you become the best climber you can be? You dream big. You plan your trip and pack your bag. You get on the climb. You try. You make mistakes. You adjust. You fall off and pull back on and fall off again. You care enough to ask why. You learn. You adapt over and over again. In my new book, Adapt, Lessons Learned Climbing 105.13s, I dig deep into not only the decisions made, hurdles confronted, and lessons learned, but also the life situations and experiences that led me there. I tell the story of how this big goal came to be and how I reached it on the morning of my 50th birthday. Whether you're a weekend warrior, like I was for most of my climbing career, or a full-time climber trying to push your limits over the long term, this book will help you learn the important lessons without making the same mistakes that I did. PowerCompanyClimbing.com/adapt, or the link is right there in your show notes.
What do you feel like are some common mistakes people make around working goes?
I'm going to start with a big one. The feeling that you've learned enough, and now all that needs to happen for you to do the route is you to get lucky one time.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that word. Yeah.
I have to get lucky. If I can get lucky on this move, if I can get lucky and stick this hold, I'm going to the top. That might work for you now and then. That's how luck works.
Yes.
But it's not going to work very often. Again, because it's luck, you know?
Yes.
I don't have the time to allow luck to be a big part of the equation. Is it going to play a part? Absolutely, all the time. But I'm not going to rely on it. Hope is not a strategy. I am very rarely just hoping that this is going to work out. I am making sure on my working goes that I've figured out a way that it's going to work out so that I can make the most out of my time that I have outside. So I think that hope that you're going to get lucky is a massive mistake that a lot of people make when they could spend another working go or two and really dial that in and make their percentage of sticking that move or whatever better. They might find better beta. They might find better efficiencies below it so that they have a little more when they get there. And then they're taking a lot of that luck out of the equation. But they're like, all right, I don't care if it's 100 red point goes. All I got to do is get lucky once.
Yes, I think this is a great one. And luck is real, obviously. We're not pretending it's not. Sometimes you get incredibly lucky. There are plenty of times, I feel like there are plenty of routes or links I've done where I just got super lucky and never should have happened. Like we talked about on the low pointing episode. I had this experience on a route to where on like my fourth trying this 14A, I linked from 2 moves into the top. And then I tried it another 10 days and never did it. There were a lot of things that went wrong there. But truthfully, I think I got very lucky on that one go. I happened to hit every single hold perfectly. I did so many things so well, even beyond my own kind of conscious effort. Yeah, I definitely got very lucky. Would have loved to have gotten a little luckier, tried it from the ground. But, doesn't always happen. But relying on luck, that should not be. That's like saying your retirement's going to be lottery tickets.
Yeah,
like
totally.
We've got better methods. Let's not do that. So I think that's a great one and one I didn't have on my list. I think as far as errors people make with red point goes, a very common one I see is people will say, oh, well, I can only go up it like twice per day because otherwise I get a little bit, I'm too tired to give a great third or fourth go. Here's the thing. If you're doing a working go, you don't need to be 100%. We're not performing. We are investigating. And if anything, being a little fatigued will help your working goes because you're not going to be able to overpower this route, which is, man, that's such a huge issue. Also, I talked about earlier this idea of route rust of, oh, well, maybe last weekend's weather was bad and you did something the weekend before. It's been 3 weeks since you've been on this route. Get a bunch of reps in. Man, go up it 4 times. Even if that fourth go you are a little bit tired or very tired. Yeah, if there's one tweaky move or one very strenuous move, sure, pull right past it. But you're going to be able to dial in all the other moves so much better. And especially if you're a weekend warrior, you're not going to get back on this for another 7 days. It's okay if you empty the tank a little bit, if you're going to need an extra rest day. If this truly is a performance project and something important, yeah, lean into it. Like we are trying to get as much out of this in the time that we have.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think this takes so much from me that I can't have more than 1 or 2 valuable goes a day is a big error. There's almost always more questions you can answer, or new things you can learn. So big error.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I see is that when there is a big question, it's what people avoid.
Oh yeah, it is.
And I don't even quite understand this. Like it's almost like you can't pass. You can't get through this unless you figure something out there. But you want to climb better up to there and then climb better after that. So that's what you just keep doing. and you
Mhm.
avoid this one thing, whether it scares you, whether it makes you nervous, whatever it is. It might be a scary clip that you have to do on lead. Um, it might be just a really hard move that's going to be tough to do from the ground that you feel out of control at. Whatever it is, that's what people are avoiding. And they're like, oh, well, I'll go to bolt 4. I'll go in direct. I'll rest. I'll do this move again. And then I'm going to try to send from there to the top, which I've already done multiple times.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
some reason, they think eventually all the other parts will just get better enough that suddenly I can do this one thing I'm scared of. You have to confront it. You have to start answering the questions. Let's say it's a hard clip. Make that your red point. That now my goal is from the ground, I'm going to make that clip.
Absolutely.
Make it from the bolt below, climb up to it, clip it. Make it from two bolts below, climb up, make that clip, take. Work it out such that you're more confident in it coming from the ground. If you've got a big question you're avoiding, you have to tackle it.
Completely agree. I have a client who we were talking the other day, and I like the way she put this. So she was kind of learning how to cook, like in a much larger way, rather than just like a couple simple meals. Just trying to understand like how do you cook an entire meal, and she realized that cooking a full meal is a lot like the redpoint process or the projecting process. And I really like this because I love projecting and I love cooking. But
I do
if
this
you're
with learning songs.
oh, interesting.
I look at learning songs as red pointing.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So with this, she was like, okay, well, everything's going to take a different amount of time when you cook. Let's say you have a protein that's going to take a certain amount of time. And, you're also maybe cooking rice or pasta. Then you have some greens, whatever it is, you have a salad. And the goal is everything should be coming to the table at the perfect temperature at the right time. You can't start everything all together at once, or like you can get things set up and have plans for how you're going to start things, but you want everything to kind of come together at the same time, ideally. So if you are trying to figure out, okay, well, there's this one link that's really hard for me. Also, I want to smooth out the bottom 511 section, and there's this clip I feel like I could do better. Really great climbers kind of learn how to time everything well to where you say, okay, I'm going to put more time into this one really hard link, knowing that it's probably going to take me a couple sessions to really dial in. And, all in my last warm up will be, I will do the first 4 bolts 2-3 times. And so that's going to take care of that. And ideally, everything sort of formulates to where you finish all your working burns and now you're ready for red point goes and you have all your answers, all your questions answered, rather than kind of what you were saying of, well, I've got this one thing, but I keep putting it on the back burner and I'm going to do all the links up to this and then I'll do all the links after. Man, because that's where things get really frustrating for people because they no longer have these small wins to look forward to. They just say, well, either I do this move from the ground or I don't. That's what it feels like, or this is the only thing stopping me from doing this route. Man, that's a really tough way to go compared to always having kind of something going to where you can come in and be like, oh, well, man, if I could do bolt 4 to bolt 7 today, that would be a huge win. Also, I would love if I could, figure out that opening boulder problem a little bit better, just refine it. If you always kind of have some pieces moving, that's a much more exciting way to project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I'm looking at a song in terms of the red point process, for me, it's like where are the parts of this song that need a lot of energy versus where can I relax a little more? Where do I take all my breaths? I look at the verses as like sections of a route, and okay, I've done this song to bolt 5, and then I fell and then I was able to get back on and go to the top. Can I do it next time to bolt 6 and, things like that? Is there a crux that feels strange? I write songs in a really narrative way, and often I'll use devices that are like repetitive. And if I set up a verse in the same way with the same words, I'll often fuck up and repeat the same verse twice. So for me, that's a non-intuitive crux that I have to like give myself some sort of tag to be like, okay, you're going to do this different than you think you should. So I see them the same way. And I love that the cooking analogy comes in too. I'm sure that can happen in all sorts of things, whether you're a carpenter or whatever.
Yeah. No, and I love that a lot. I love that you said, there's this non-intuitive verse and I need a tag here. Like that is such a great point for working burns. Because at a certain point, once you've done a certain sequence, you might say, yeah, this feels kind of mindless. This is great. And I lock in, I flow. It climbs the way I like to climb. Cool. When you're doing mental rehearsals, you don't really need to worry about that as much anymore. Right. That's wonderful because, yeah, if there's 50 moves on a route and 35 of them feel just natural and intuitive, make sure you're doing them well, but then you can kind of put them to the side and really put your energy into the other moves. And this is something I see people make a mistake with a lot of times is they'll be rehearsing things in their head and they'll really be obsessing over a boulder or a route, but they're putting their obsession into all of the moves equally, where really it's like, hey, if you just remember when you do the crux move your left foot first. Like that's the non-intuitive move. You want to move your right foot, but it traps you every time.
Yeah.
Don't worry about everything, the 5 moves below, the 5 moves above. If you do this non-intuitive left foot move, your body knows how to climb and it will do the rest. And so understanding where to put these little sticky notes, throughout a climb is so crucial.
Yeah, totally. And this is a common thing I see in like the mid 512 climber and below is that even if they intend to pull on and try a move differently, they'll automatically revert back to their intuitive way.
Yes.
And they end up doing that like 4 or 5 times in a row. And then they're like, well, this must just be the way. And I'm like, no, you literally never tried it the other way. They're like, well, I thought about it and I just ended up doing it this way. So this must be the way. I'm like, no, it does not work that way. You have to try the move other ways.
Yeah. Yes.
But I see it all the time. And this is actually one of the questions in the questionnaire for the Atomic Elements of Climbing Movement evaluation. This leads you into that. And I believe it's one of the commitment questions. Like, how committed can you be to a new sequence that doesn't feel quite right? And I see it happen all the time. And I think that's a big mistake.
A huge mistake. I mentally shake people all the time when I see this. People will have one hand on a jug and another hand on a crimp. And if they have to move their hand off the jug to do this sequence correctly, but they need to keep the jug's bigger. Why would they leave the jug?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm vibrating.
Yeah. I see it all the time, man. It cracks me up. One other thing I think is a really common error is that you've found your process of working a route and you stay there. The next route you get on, you're like, oh, well, I have to top rope it 3 times. Ooh, and then I lead it bolt to bolt twice. And then I'll start high pointing, and I just go until I red point. That's my process. And so often I see, especially like maybe 13A and below climbers fall into this trap of, this is my process. This is how I get it done. This is what's comfortable. Yes. So I'm going to do it every time. And I've fallen into that trap myself of, I think my tactics are really good. My working process is really good. So I'll just continue that. And it wasn't until I took the evaluation for the Atomic Elements that said, oh, you need to be committing on a more micro level a little faster. And once I did that, the pace really picked up and I was able to send things much quicker because I was making little commitments that it would often take me 2 or 3 goes to commit to these little changes that felt scary or uncomfortable or made me anxious or whatever. So I think you constantly have to interrogate your process and try to speed it up a little bit. Try to combine 2 steps. Try to cut a step out, something.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got kind of a funny story of I was climbing with someone who we both wanted to do. So I was climbing with Tomer out in the new.
Mm-hmm.
And Tomer's a fantastic sport climber. And this year, this was a few years ago, it was me, him, and Jeremy Rush. Jeremy was the guest on the New River Gorge
Mm-hmm. What, when, how to train.
What, when, how to train. Thank you. Where Jeremy and I just gushed about the New River Gorge for the entirety. But Tomer and I both happened to be in the new at the same time, and Jeremy was like, wait, have y'all done one for the Gipper? It's a 50-foot, steep, overhanging 13C, incredible route. And super cold day. It was honestly the only thing we could climb on that day because it was frigid. He was like, let's go. I did it last season. I'd love to go take y'all out there. I'm going to rest today. I'll spray y'all down. Y'all should both try and do it in a day. And Tomer had been climbing a rifle all season, was locked in, had climbed some 514s, was doing 13 plus fast. And he was really big on, he likes to count how many goes things take him, which totally makes sense. And it's a metric he can use. Because if he can say, 10 years ago, it took him 30 goes to send 13A, and now he regularly does it second go, amazing. Like that is a metric that can show progress. Where with me, I was more okay with just doing whatever it took to get this thing done. So it's funny, we took very different approaches. My first go, I think I went to the 4th bolt like 5 times because it was freezing and I was like, I just want to warm up. First 4 bolts were like 11 plus. So I just did them a bunch of times in a row. His first pitch of the day, he did a 510 around the corner. He really wanted to second go this route. My second pitch, I go up, there's, it's like 12 plus 13 minus up to a 1 move V7. So now I go up the first few bolts a few more times to get my body warm again. I do the middle crux, and then I check out going up to the top. So his next go, he goes up the 12A around the corner to keep warming up. And essentially, my third go, I do the exact same thing. So I'm tying in a couple times through the low stuff, go up, figure out the top boulder, lower down. Then his first go on it was like a 90-minute go of dialing in every single move, understanding all the sequences. He's asking Jeremy questions, me questions, and he's really getting it locked in. And then we both send a next go. And it was really funny talking with him about it because he was just we're both thrilled. It was such a fun thing to both get to send this thing so fast. But he was like, he's like, in a way, when I watch you do this, I sort of wish I wasn't so attached to the number of goes I put into things. And I mean, he did this 13C second try. Amazing. And he was able to do that because he was so sharpened from this year of sport climbing. He was so locked in, and I knew I wasn't. But I knew I could just club this thing over the head. I probably left the ground 15 times in this day.
Right.
Which is for a lot of people, they'd be like, that's idiotic. But it got the job done, and I knew I didn't have the sharpness. I wasn't skilled enough with sport climbing because I hadn't sport climbed that year. But I knew my intuition. I knew that I could go up, and if I do the moves enough, my body will memorize them. And I still understood enough of, this move's going to be challenging. Let's really overlap this a few times. But yeah, it was just a really fun example of you don't need one perfect method. And methods can change route to route because if this wasn't a 50-foot route, I would never tie in 15 times in a day. That's absurd. But for this, it worked great. So I think it's okay to change what your methods are over time to also not feel like one method has to be the best or hold yourself accountable to certain things. It's fun to do hard routes in a few number of tries, but when it really comes down to it, and this kind of cuts into my last point, the number of days you spend on a route, I think, is a more important measurement than the number of goes. Because we have days. If you climb outside 30 days a year, you have 30 days. If you are fit enough, and this is kind of, for me, a little bonus to working goes, if you have incredible work capacity, Like, I know people who can give 5 good red point burns a day on their project.
Yeah.
That means 150 goes over those 30 days. If you can only give like, well, I can bolt to bolt up it to finish the warm up and give 1 good red point burn, yikes. Like, even if you're the exact same level as that person who can give 5 goes, they're going to send so many more rock climbs than you. They're going to be able to, like, it doesn't matter if this person took 20 goes to send, they did it in 4 days. If it also takes you 20 goes, that's most of your year.
Yeah, totally. Especially if you're really attached to counting goes, and that means you give 1 good red point effort a day, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to wait till I'm fresh again to give another red point go. So I'll come back next week and try it again. For a weekend warrior, that can eat up a season very, very quickly.
Yeah, it will, man. And that's cool that you just did this 13A in 6 tries, but that was all of
Took you
October.
6 weeks.
And yeah, all of October, half of November. Cool. What else are you doing? Like, for, I know people who would 6 tries, that's 1 day.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that when we look at training for climbing, it's really easy to get zeroed in on what does this one task look like? I need to be fit for 50 moves at this level of overhang and this time under tension. And that's cool if you're only ever going to give 1 burn. But if you're fit enough to give a lot of burns, especially for people who have slightly better technique or want better technique, and people who can really translate repetitions into higher performance, the fitter you are, the better. I mean, I see this in bouldering. Like, if you're bad at, finding better positions and nuance with boulders, sure, that's fine if you can only give 5 goes a day. You're not improving go to go. But there are people who can sit under a boulder for 6 hours. Every single effort is a little bit better. It's 1% better. That's huge. If you have the fitness to be able to keep trying it over and over and iterate and make these small changes, that is such a huge win for that type of climber.
Yeah, totally. And this is not on my list of points to make, but giving a working go at the end of the day, like you mentioned earlier, you don't need to be as fresh for, can very often answer some questions or bring to light questions you didn't think to answer or to ask, where you're like, oh, I just got through that, even though I was far more fatigued than I'm ever going to be from the ground.
Huge.
Yeah. It can really add a lot of confidence. So I think it's important to maximize your available time rather than always be applying these rules that you have to be fresh to do your hardest thing or something.
Yeah. That's a huge one that you just brought up. Like, I used to joke that I don't believe in red point, or I don't believe in punting. I don't do it. It's not for me.
Till you punted.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, even if I punt, it's kind of like one of those things where I'm like, I could have done this better. Like, I could have worked this out better. There are things that could have happened, but even still, I still believe in the idea. I don't believe in punting. Like, and it's funny. Years ago, I was climbing out at the monastery and I was trying the quickening, a 13C with a few other people, and went up it a handful of times. And I was there just for like a day before leaving to go to Smith. Went up it a few times, and every time I would do the red point crux like 4 or 5 times. And every single time, it's like, you do it 5 times in a row with short rest. I would be so much more fatigued than I knew I would be on point. But, I had done it 5 times in a row, so it was easier to repeat. And one thing you said, first off, it was a huge boon to my confidence, because when I did get there, I was like, dude, I've done this so much more tired. But it was funny, before my red point go, like, it's one of those moments of speaking before I thought, but I was talking with one of the guys who had been trying it for a few weeks, and he was just starting to get to the red point crux. He hadn't linked to it from the ground yet, but he was like, God, I feel like I'm going to spend weeks falling in that red point crux. And then he turns to me, he's like, what about you? You worried about it? And I was just, without anything, I was like, no, I'm never going to punt there. Like, just, and like, he just paused. I was like, sorry. I was like, but it's not going to happen. I do not plan on falling there, and I'm planning on not falling there. And I've done in my mind, from then I was like, well, no, I've done the work. And then I tied in and I did it, and I never fell up there.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just a funny thing. We talked about it afterwards, but I was like, dude, like, you don't need to punt. Red point cruxes tend to just be more of an issue for the people who don't put in the work. Go to the anchors every time. Man, especially when I lived in the red, like on the undertow wall, everything has a red point crux going to the anchors. Yeah, go to the anchors, lower down, top rope it through it like 3-4 times every single time, and you will never fall.
Yeah, totally. And I think, first off, I don't think you can punt from a red point crux. I think because it's a red point crux, you're supposed to fall there. So
that's not punting; it's just hard.
That's not really punting.
Yeah,
but and I detail this in Adapt. It sort of became the thesis for Adapt, the new book. So I won't go too deep into the story, but on 513 number 100, I came closer to punting than I have ever been without actually punting. The end of the route was probably 11 plus, maybe 12 minus, which I should be able to just climb no problem, no matter how tired I am. And I was falling off of every single move. It was all I could do to stay on the wall. I had to pull out every trick I've ever used. And so much so that when I watched the video back, Johnny was filming it and he's getting impatient. He's like, just move, coach. You got to do something. Like, just try it then. He's getting so impatient with me while I'm climbing because I'm trying to figure it out. It took me 90 seconds to get through the first 4 bolts, which is the crux. And then the final 3 bolts took me 7.5 minutes.
Oh, God. That is upsetting.
It was so bad. But I think the last thing I'll say here on this is that, especially if fear is the reason that you're avoiding answering a question or changing your process, if fear is the thing holding you back, the only way I've ever experienced to get through fear, to improve on that, is to meet it head on. And whatever it is you're afraid of, try it. You have to, early in the process, start meeting those fears head on, or you're just never going to get through them. It's always going to be a problem. You might have your 5-day process that gets you through that fear, but it's always going to be a 5-day process unless you start trying to shortcut it in some way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think for people who regularly feel like it takes them 10 goes up a route just to be able to remember what they're doing, or 20 goes. And I've heard this, people who are like, yeah, it takes me like, close to 20 goes before I remember what hands and feet I'm using. This is for you. Great climbers can go up a route twice and they're going to know 95% of that route.
Yeah.
Really good ones can go up at once and their second go. This is how Adam Ondra is regularly described. I remember when he went to the Frankenura and climbed with Alex Magos, I think it was the first time they climbed together. Alex was blown away by the fact that Adam's second go on routes, he was like, it looks like it might as well be his 100th. He just knows everything. He was able to gather so much on a first go that this just looks like the most casual red point effort, most knowledgeable red point effort. Yeah. And if you're a weekend warrior, you want that. Like, how fast can we go from, okay, I'm trying this new route, to I'm here truly ready to try and send? Like, it's nice to have a bunch of working goes and really spend all this time, but the goal is also to truncate this down to where it's potent.
Yeah, I think you can look at Adam Ondra's on-site of Just Do It at Smith. Mm-hmm. In his video that is his commentary of that on-site. I did a breakdown on it in the blog years ago. It's really fascinating because he's climbed the route exactly one time, but he remembered every feeling, He remembered how he felt when he hit certain holds. He knew every part of this. And you can listen to him and recognize that he's like, oh, this part, this is intuitive. This is not a section I would need to worry about. And this is probably the process he goes through on his first go. Essentially, he's packing all of this information in on a hard redpoint attempt or a hard project. So this section's intuitive. I'm going to climb it just like this. I did it just like that. I'll do it just like that every time. Not an issue. But then he starts talking about these emotions of like, I grabbed this hold and I immediately felt like this hold, I had it wrong, or, this hold was going to be too bad or whatever. And those are the moments that stick with him where he's like, I had to make a decision rather than just climbing on intuition. And he goes more in depth on those parts than any other part. Even if from us watching, we can't see that it slowed him down at all.
Yeah.
It just looks like he took a breath there or he chalked up there.
Yeah.
But in his mind, he's like, I'm agonizing over this decision. Do I try to go to this hold? Do I try to match? Do I try to get this hold better? Where do I get my foot? He's considering all of this. In your process, those are the things that you latch onto. And seeing that Adam can do that on his first go on an onsite, it's very clear that he can combine a lot of the steps of this process and know whether this is a thing I need to be focused on or this is a thing I'm just going to do the same every time, so it doesn't matter. I can put it out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such an important piece to speeding up your process is combining all of this down. It's not that Adam necessarily remembers, I put my left foot here, I put my right foot here, I grab this hold exactly like this. He just knows there's this 40 feet of climbing where I don't even have to think about that. I'm just going to climb it and it works fine. And then for these 10 feet, I need to be on and I need to remember I step on this foot and I turn my hip just in this way that makes me be able to engage this foothold. And then I'm going to take this next hold with just 3 fingers because it feels better to drop the pinky because of course it does. And then I'm through, And I think beginner climbers make the mistake of feeling like they have to remember every single detail of a route and like commit it to memory and just be crazy about all of these little things. They have to write it in their book and have, left, right, left, right, step on this little nubbin, all written down in this book. But if that's just the intuitive way, you might not need all of that. You may remember it over time, but it's not like you have to commit all of this energy to the parts that aren't going to be a problem. You should be committing more energy to the parts that are still questions, to the parts that you don't want to confront. Those are where your energy should go immediately.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's something that takes time to develop. The idea, the intuition to where things can be automatic. And for people who only project, you'll hate to hear this, but climbing a lot more second tier routes is a great way to develop that. And especially if you go to a new area where, let's say you've never climbed on limestone. Yeah, you don't have any intuition there. It all feels a little funny. If you go climb a ton of routes, you're going to develop it so that when you get on harder things, a lot more of these sections are automatic. It's not this slow, clunky process.
Totally. Anything else on this that you've got that we haven't talked about? I think we've hit everything I wanted to discuss.
Ooh, actually, yeah. Just one real brief. One of my favorite methods is for getting better at this is run a post-mortem on your last project. So when you're done, let's say something took you 20 days of work. Yeah, how much of that was really necessary? Was sessions 2 through 5 really that useful? Where, if you were to do it again, how fast could you do it now, knowing what you knew? And I think this is something that people skip out on a lot because they're like, well, that was my process. That's what it took. It took me, 50 days to do this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is how you end up in that comfortable space of my process always looks like this.
Totally. But look back, be really honest. One big one is, did you spend a lot of time climbing on it in really bad conditions? to where you truly couldn't even try it that well. Because there's one thing to try it in like okay conditions, but man, if something's truly terrible, you might be just running your head against the wall for no reason. Like, I saw this all the time in the red. People would mega project something all summer, give it 80 goes. Then the second it drops to below 80 degrees, they send it. And then they're like, oh, I don't know what to do with the fall now. It's like, okay, well, you could have spent that whole summer climbing on slightly easier things, really building up your skills, building up your base. And instead of 80 goes to send this 13A, probably could have done it in like 5 or 6 once it was actually nice out. Just because, especially as things get harder, conditions do matter.
Yeah.
But this idea of running a postmortem, stop, think about, what were all my sessions? How good were they truly? Where could I have combined efforts to where, I spent a bunch of goes working the bottom, bunch of goes working the top. Could I have kind of overlapped those and maybe cut some days out here and there? Thinking about that, I think, is really important. Like, yes, being aware during the process is great, but stopping and analyze afterwards, that's where a lot of value really is.
Yeah, and you have to put those things into action with the next time you engage in a similar length project, something you expect to be similar length. Put those changes into effect and see what happens, and be brutal about that. You don't want it to be chaotic. Should be a little uncomfortable. You should be pushing into discomfort on a lot of those attempts, rather than just falling back into that comfortable place. But it shouldn't feel like chaos. If you're trying to combine 15 steps into one and it just feels like chaos and you can't keep it all straight when you're up there, you're trying to do too much. So step it back somehow. Just like learning any other skill, but you do have to put it into action.
Yeah. I think you worded that really well. Try to put it into practice in a way to where it's like, oh, this is a little bit uncomfortable, not quite overwhelming. And if you're a little uncomfortable, you'll learn, you'll get better. A lot of these things will feel more automatic, and you can start to combine more and more over time.
Yep, totally. All right, you know where to find us on YouTube at Nate Drolet and at Power Company Climbing, and you can get in touch with us through powercompanyclimbing.com. Learn, grow, excel.
This time, this time to build.